Hey folks, welcome back to Straight Talk Whiskey. This is episode number 10. I'm Nick, and if you're joining us midweek, it's because it is the end of our mini-series on Tullamore Dew Irish Whiskey. And we are culminating with the Tullamore Dew 12-year, but it's a 12-year blended Irish whiskey that has been around since the 1950s, 1960s. I'm not sure exactly when it is. I purchased this online, and the dates are a little bit unclear as to when it was, but most of the research that I've done indicates that it was probably bottled in the 50s to 60s. So going back 12 years before that, that places it in, 30s and 40s, which is, pretty special. So first let me just get into the story of kind of what happened here. Now I've had this sitting for only about 3 or 4 months now. Got it towards the tail end of December of last year. And so what happened 2 days ago actually, when I went to open this, obviously it has a seal on it. The seal was intact, everything was good. But when I took it out, you can kind of see, well, and there goes that, the cork has kind of been deteriorating. You can kind of see it flakes off a little bit there. So what's happened is that it's been sitting probably upright like this for so long, because, how else would you store it? You can't lie it down. It's not going to work like that. It's just going to look kind of weird. It's not lined. We're not going to lay it down horizontally. There's other people out there who suggest differently, but storing bottles vertically, it's just, how I know to do it. So, in its, 60, 70 years of sitting, the cork has dried out, because it doesn't have the contact with the whiskey. So, it's just has dried out and has become brittle and has flaked off. But I'm attributing that mostly to the fact that I pulled this out. So that probably jarred loose some little specks that are in there and went into the whiskey only a little bit. I don't have those because what I did actually was I had to extract the cork just using a vintage wine opener, and then I actually poured it through a coffee filter. And I don't have that right now. But basically, it's one of the, not like a paper filter that you buy in like a 50-pack or something, but one that just sits into the coffee maker, has like a nice mesh sleeve to it. So I ran it through there a few times. So the whiskey is actually not in here, but was placed in another bottle that I had, just an empty bottle lying around, and kind of washed the label off of there. And it's got a screw top, which, is better because, well, at least for storing it, just because, it's not going to flake off and deteriorate. I'll get into a later point of view how you can tell if the screw top is good or bad. But in this case, this is a fairly recent whiskey bottle that I had finished, so just emptied that out and put the contents in there. And I don't believe, looking at the color and giving it just a quick smell, I didn't want to go too in depth until I did this review, it doesn't seem to be tainted by the cork at all. Now, it had this broken off, and I was like, oh, it broke off, let me just put that back on. I don't want to open it until, later. I'll just kind of save it, hold on to it. Then I would have ran into a problem because basically the alcohol would have just eaten the cork alive, basically, and would have tainted the whiskey. I don't believe that it would be toxic, but it definitely would ruin the flavors that are in this, and I wouldn't be here able to review this for you as our last little installment on the Tullamore Dew miniseries. Now, I haven't tasted this yet. I've only given a brief smell. You can see on here, Tullamore Dew, 12-year-old, bottled 86 proof. So back then, this was a little bottled at a higher proof than standard bottling. Now, I'll show you this little, and this is interesting. It's a neat little print advertisement that I got. This is very, very old. because it's around the same time period. You can see this is the exact jar. Well, not, I mean, this isn't the one in the photograph, but it's the same type from the same time period. It was 86 proof, 12-year-old at the time. So it'd be the only thing similar now is the 12-year special reserve that we did 2 weeks ago. But for some reason, I don't think it's going to be the same flavor. And it's funny because it says, this is a Christmas ad, it says, it's Christmas, don't be Scotch, give a little extra for this great Irish whiskey. And then it goes on to say, for $10 a fifth, you can afford not to be Scotch. So you can kind of see, just, you know, it's humorous now, but just the competition going on there between Irish and Scotch whiskey. And come on, I mean, $10 for, you know, a fifth of some 12-year-old is unheard of today. Obviously, because it's not 60 years ago. Obviously, we know that. So, on the other side, just so you can see, Ishkabaha, the Irish for basically how we got whiskey, but translates to water of life, as they called it. And it's still, you can see it's holding on to the trademark, give every man his due, the Tullamore trademark there. Shipped and bottled by the Tullamore Dew Company, Dublin, Ireland. Now, obviously we know they're building, William Grant & Sons is building a new distillery in Tullamore right now. So, just kind of interesting. There's a little booklet here. I'm obviously not going to go read through here because we don't have 3.5 hours to tell you everything that's in here. But it is interesting to see kind of what was around back then. Is you always just get nostalgia. I don't know what side to show you, so I'll just kind of leave it on there. But let's get into the tasting because that's why you probably clicked on this video. And I don't think there's any other review out there of this. Like I said, first time I'll be trying this. I expect it to be some decent quality. Like I said, I don't believe it's tainted. Shouldn't be. You'll know by the next review if there is a review or not. But no, it's not that serious. So looking at the color, it's funny because it's like, you know, we're right back at home with the Tullamore line that we've been looking at. This nice gold, maybe a +1, but that's about it. Let's go in for the nose. Now first what I get in here is kind of this almost like aldehyde, little chemical, some fresh grass, fresh mowed grass. There's definitely the light fruits in there from the triple distillation. A lot of copper influence, the copper pot stills, getting a lot of that influence in there. Now again, this is a blend, so we have, you know, all three types, the grain, malt, and the single pot still. They called it pure pot still back then, and that's only recently changed. But a lot of people hold on to the pure pot still name instead of single pot still. But you know, it's all semantics, so whatever. So let's go in again. So what I think I smell here is a lot of light fruit, and what it seems like is this has been aged in sherry casks. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to really dig and kind of poke around and ask different people about the history on this, but I'm guessing I'm getting a lot of the same fruit notes that I would get with something that has been in sherry casks. Still got the nice light honey, a little lemony. Again, the grass and sort of this like chemical aromas hit me more than anything, but it still smells, still looks like an Irish whiskey. So let's go in for the taste, the ultimate moment of truth. Now, the first thing off the bat is it seems like there's more of a pot still content in this. It's got this nice spice, but a heavier spice with a little bit of wood smoke in there. I'm getting the sherried fruits, some dried nuts in there, but not as light as most Irish whiskeys that I taste today. And that's sort of interesting because, as the times changed, and we saw this back in the early, we personally didn't see it, but in the early 1900s, and moving on after Prohibition, the likes of what people wanted changed. People kind of wanted something a little bit lighter. They thought, oh, this is like, drinking liquid, like gasoline, basically. And people were like, okay, we need something lighter. And that's why Irish whiskeys appeal to a lot of people, because it is this light, fruity, fragrant, honey, lemony, zesty spirit that's easy to mix. But my suspicions are that at one point at 1950s and 1960s and before, at least in Ireland where this was shipped to, this was sure I can find it on here somewhere. Yes, imported into Hartford, Connecticut. So this was originally imported, so it was also reflecting not only just the people of Ireland and Scotland and Europe, which was nearby, but a more global mindset of what people were wanting on the time, which I believe was probably a little bit heavier than we find today. We're starting to see that change now. We're starting to see more flavor profiles. People are starting to experiment more, which is what we really need in the whiskey industry. Some things stay the same for too long, and we have all these different ways of experimenting with different cuts of the master distiller, different blends, just all these different things. The Irish spirits sector is just beginning to experiment with Irish oak instead of the traditional, American bourbon barrels and sherry casks from Spain and things like that, European oak. But traditionally Irish oak, which is kind of the first in a number of years. So let's go back. And what I'm also getting is a little bit of the malt characteristic in there. So as a blend, I would say the pot still content is the highest. And then the malt characteristics, kind of this light, freshly baked bread, biscuits. It's got that early bakery smell that you might get if you pass through on an early weekday morning. Any American, ex-bourbon barrel influence isn't totally there. I guess I attribute a little of that, well, not attribute it, but I do sense a little bit of wood smoke, sort of. There's not a lot of the American bourbon wood influence there, so my guess is, again, I'm going to stick with the sherry cask. I could be wrong, could be right, but I'm going to stick with that because that's what I taste. If you ever get the chance, because these are floating around there, some people, when I first looked into getting this, people just had it kind of like stashed away, kind of forgotten. You have to remember, and I have to remind myself as I'm tasting that this is not supposed to be some extravagant whiskey. It's not, and certainly in today's perspective, this would not be seen as a overly high value whiskey in terms solely of its quantity, but merely for the rarity of it is basically where it gets its price, because it is 60 to 70 years old. It was full. The seal, as you can see on here, is ripped now, obviously, because I opened it, but this was intact. The booklet was intact. Everything was as it should be. It was a nice fill on it, even though you can't see it, you can kind of feel around, and it just felt right. But the quality of the whiskey inside, which we are most interested in, was nothing eccentric, elaborate, that kind of thing. It's not a 50-year-old blended whiskey. I don't know if I'd want that, but basically, when you put whiskey in, at whatever year it is, when it gets in either a glass bottle or ceramic jug, it is what it is. It's a 12-year blend. That's what it is. It doesn't matter how long it's been there, and it's not really, besides the cork, some problems that you could have with it, it's going to stay the same, which is a disappointment for some, and it's really interesting for others. It's really interesting for me because I can taste what people were tasting back 60, 70 years ago, which for me is just phenomenal. It's kind of like a little glimpse back into the past and seeing how people drank whiskey back then, or what they were drinking rather. And it's a disappointment for some because they feel like more time it's sitting there, not maturing like we know, but just sitting there in the bottle, sort of gives it more worth or more, I don't know, makes it taste better. I don't know how many people there are that think that, because that's a little it's grossly misunderstood. But there's a lot of collectors out there who just want to take something like this and hold on to it forever. I got this for the purpose that I'm a fan of Tullamore. I like the history surrounding it and that sort of thing. And as I talk here, I'm just going to pour a little water in here and see if anything changes. But you know, there's some people that, like me, just want to drink it for what it is, and taste what it was like back then, like I said, and not collectors who buy a bottle and say, "Oh, I'm going to open this," or "I'm never going to open this because it's only going to increase in value." Well, whiskey is about drinking, in my opinion. Certainly, there's those special bottles that you buy for special occasions. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who steal. I say steal, kind of to accentuate and get across a point here. But they take these whiskeys off the shelf that you or me would end up drinking for a special occasion or something like that. And they take it off the market so that it can just sit somewhere and people can say, well, there's no more or less. So the one that I do find, well, that price is going to jack right up, 500% or even more. You can see, I can't really see that much here because the auctions aren't that great around here. But overseas, in Europe, and that end of the world, you can see the auctions of things that go for unbelievable prices. So, yeah, that's my little rant on the collector's industry. Now, I collect stuff, but it's mostly things that I can review for you that's going to be easily found somewhere else. Obviously, this isn't, but it's out there, like I said. And for me, just in summary, it's just a glimpse back into the past of what was. So I'll get off the soapbox there and get back to the whiskey. So like I said, 86 proof, add a little bit of water in there. Doesn't need much. As we said in previous reviews, I'd say 40% ABV is a good place to be tasting things to get any sort of the harsh kicks out of there, of the alcohol, that sort of thing. So let's go back. Now I would say the sherry notes are a little more subdued in this. The fruits are more subdued. The dried nuts, I get more of a sense of the fresh malted barley is still there, but it's dumbed down a little bit. And I'm guessing it's hard to say exactly what that is attributed to. It's very possible that in different climates this had some air, oxygen get in there. It's always possible, especially if this has been over in the United States. It could have been left in an attic, which is very possible, where it gets heat of 100, 105 in our summers sometimes. And of course that only expands and contracts the wood of the cork in there, which could have let some oxygen in. So I believe there was probably a little bit of the oxidation process going on and some of the flavors being dumbed down a little bit, but not overly so. Still light, not as light as today, as we said, but fragrant, spicy from the pot still content, nice honey, It's kind of like got this little tartness on the end in terms of finish. It lingers around a bit longer than I would say the standard bottling of Tullamore, but I believe it's probably on par with the 12-year Special Reserve in terms of finish only, except that with the 12-year Reserve I get more of the vanilla and a little bit of cinnamon, nutmeg, toffee, the wood tannins influence from American Bourbon Cask that I don't get here. So that's just a note there. So I didn't write down a score because had to be true to my word in that I didn't taste this beforehand. But let's go ahead and give it a score. So Straight Talk Whiskey score for 10th review. Yeah, that's right. Sometimes forget. We will give it a modest 88 out of 100. So that was our last mini-series review on Tullamore Dew. So after a little more than a month, we are finally getting back on track, and we'll be headed to a Scotch this upcoming weekend. We're still going to stick with the same schedule there, so be looking out for that. And until then, glasses up in the tradition of Ireland. Good night, and joy be with you all.